Excuse me. If you're going to be back here, you have to have a pass.
A pass? A pass? I'm gonna pass some information on to you. You bozos outside got the trucks blocking my car in. My Rolls Royce.
What are you talking about? Where did you park?
What do you think? You listen to me? I just said I parked up between your trucks. That's why I can't move. Don't you give me attitude. I'm a mother. No, I mean, I'm a doctor. I'm a surgeon. I come down here as a favor to Mr. King. You see, his hands are insured for $1 million. Now, the insurance company not gonna let him walk out on that stage until they had him checked out by me. Meanwhile, I got a medical emergency downtown, but I can't get my damn car out.
Sir, just calm down.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Hello, Bartek. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm Ryan, and that's how I'm doing. I'm crying Ryan for this episode.
I legitimately forgot to say your name, yeah.
That's okay. I picked it up, and now it's on the table. Our table of Spit and Polish presents, because we are always spitting, and we're always Polish. Always.
Jeszcze Polska.
I knew you were going to do it, brother. I don't know why I said brother. Like, let me say it again. I knew you were going to do it, brother. Because I'm a Hulk Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan.
Paul Hogan? From Flipper?
No, Polish Hogan.
So we are doing our show Pictures Powwow, our podcast in which we talk about a movie that has come recommended, whether the recommendation is from myself, from Bartek, or from you, the listening people. That's right, you're a people, not a person. And so, a movie was recommended. I recommended the film. It's in the title of the episode, Heart and Souls, from 1993. So I'm laughing because Bartek visually looked up as I said that, like he was looking up at the title.
Where's the title?
Which works really well for an audio-based thing, because it only amuses me. So I'm saying the pitch and then I go because Bartek's being silly, which is nice of him. But we're doing Heart and Souls from 1993, starring Robert Downey Jr. and various other people. If you have not seen the film, watch the film. We're going to be talking about it in depth with details and spoilers and nuances. And if you're at all interested in watching it, or if it seems like it may be your bag, baby, watch it, because to give a pitch of the movie to entice you if you have not watched it, it is about how to describe it? These four people tragically die in a bus crash, and their souls are removed from their body, and they are attached to this one child, and they have to figure out what's going on, and the child eventually grows up to be Robert Downey Jr., and he must help them put right what once went wrong.
Yeah, just to be clear, they get attached to the child like within a minute of the child being born, and they stick around with it until it becomes Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, so, and they're wacky characters, and this is a movie directed by the same guy who did Tremors, so have fun with that.
Yep.
And written by the same people who did Tremors. In part. Have fun with that. So that's the pitch. Go. Off. It's funny, and it's dramatic, and it's musical, kind of. There's singing and dancing in it. It's diegetic. So, Bartek...
Is it diegetic?
Or non-diegetic? I don't care.
The singing's diegetic, but is the music?
I guess not.
That's the first discussion.
Heart and Souls. What is your history and relationship with this movie, and what did you think?
I don't think I've ever heard of this movie before. I know it's a shocker for me.
Whoa. What the fuck?
I know.
Dude, this was always on TV when we grew up. Where were you?
I've never heard you ask me that question before.
Where were you? When were you?
I was on a flight. No.
Killing the Polish president, allegedly.
Oh, God, no. You're going to make my stepmom cry, man.
I could do more than that. Make her clean many of the toilets in your father's house. Because Bartek's dad has like 15 toilets in his two-story house or whatever it is. And you're at a urinal, just for good measure.
Yep.
Sorry, you were saying?
Never seen this film before. Hadn't heard of it. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't heard of it. I was born the year this film came out. So yeah, so
we're four souls attached to us each?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully, like, unless 8 people died in a bus crash, how would they get divided?
Yeah, well, I get the cool ones.
Oh, that means I get the boring ones. That means I can make them cool.
Just a question. So you hadn't heard of it, seen it. When the movie did start to present itself, did any thing lingering or anything of its existence or its pitch kind of hit the palate to you as something that you may have heard of in your life?
I mean, a big part of this film's plot is the whole idea of people who have died but still have, lingering regrets, and they have to somehow, fulfill them before moving on. Like, you could almost say that, what was that film we did, Under Her Dead Body?
Over Her Dead Body.
Sorry, I did the opposite. Over Her Dead Body kind of had a thing like that, and I think there have been other things that I've seen that had a similar plot or even just a similar idea in, like, the grand scheme of things. So, even though I walked in not knowing what the plot was, that idea was familiar to me.
It's a Wonderful Life, you could argue, in a minor extent.
Yeah, it's got
they
that. They
become stars at the end. He was a star, the angel, Clarence.
Yeah.
And what did you think?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, I'm kind of a sucker for, sentimental stuff like that. So very easily I walked out of this one being like, yeah, I like that. There are some obvious issues with it that we can talk about. Nothing that I'm too...
Obvious issues?
Nothing that I'm too passionate about, but I mean, objectively, yeah, there are some things to talk about.
Interesting. Are we keen to hear your point of view of what you think are objective criticisms in this flawless film? No, of course, I understand. I grew up with this movie. It was always on TV. It is a movie that I hold very dearly. It's been the white whale of this podcast for me because it's been on and off the list for both unappreciated masterpieces and this show.
I felt that, yeah.
I was unsure if I should put it on unappreciated masterpieces because people who have seen this movie really like this movie, but at the same time it has some qualities to it that is worthy of that category of it. It's not as if people haven't seen this movie or aren't aware of this movie, but at the same time it does feel like the audience around this is a lot smaller than I think it would be.
Yeah, it feels kind of forgotten, and it's, I think on IMDb it's like sitting right on that 7 mark, which was kind of our cutoff at the time.
Yeah, so... And another not selfish reason, but like another reason I didn't want to do it for Unappreciated Masterpieces, which was our previous show in which we did commentary tracks, was the movie makes me choke up a little, and I don't know if I could restrain that on a comedy podcast, in which we would be like, I would give this rating a Milo out of pants, blah, 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 and then be like... Penny, she's a good mum. I love this movie. It's a very emotional movie. It makes me very emotional. It makes my sister very emotional. It makes Sam Noonan, one of our previous guests, very emotional.
Okay.
Anyone I've met who's watched this movie all have their moments in which it choked them up in a way, or several. And so I like it a lot, and I thought we would do it on the podcast one day, but then I just kept not doing it. I was like, no, I can't do it for Unappreciated Masterpieces. I don't think so. And then one day we'll do it for this, but then I was like, I don't know if I'm up for feeling sad in this way. Sad in other ways when we do sad movies on the podcast, like, oh, how miserable, but like sad and like, oh, this is sweet. And also tragic in parts, but like... Yeah, so I've always wanted to talk about it on here because I really like this movie. I think it needs to be talked about more. Barely anyone reviews this movie. Like, you just go on YouTube, and it's surprising how few people review this movie on YouTube. Like, we often make jokes, Bartek and I, on and off the podcast about Channel Awesome and all of those people. And I'm really surprised none of those people have ever reviewed this movie, I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
Doesn't that seem like something they would do?
Yeah.
This movie?
Yeah.
Seems so obvious to me. And I'm not saying they're the marker of quality, they're not to me, but it's something like these bigger YouTube reviewers barely talk about, and there's barely any smaller ones either. It's not saying that there isn't. And obviously there's other podcasts, but I feel like, man, I wish people would talk about Heart and Souls more often. And I wonder if I can talk to Bartek about it and hear what he has to say. I didn't have any real thoughts about how you would react to this movie. I just was thinking about myself. I was thinking how I'm going to react and how I'm going to talk about this. I didn't really know if you're going to like this, if you thought it would be too much or whatever it is. And I was just like, well, we'll see how Bartek feels about this movie. I think he'll enjoy aspects of it because it has actors we like. It has characters, like very well-defined characters, and it's one of those movies where the question will be asked, who did you like out of our characters? And you'll have a different answer depending on the person, or which one did you find the saddest to watch or the funniest to watch? So, yeah, that's my complicated but long history of the Heart and Souls. This was always on TV. Always on TV, and I've connected with so many people with this movie. Like I said, our good friend Sam Noonan, one of my friends back in Kempsey, Imogen. It's one of those things where it comes up, and you find somebody who knows it, and then you're instantly like, hug a bug, and shit like that, and you just go, oh, God, and you talk about the sad and the funny moments, walk like a man, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. What was your expectations walking in? Did you have any kind of inkling of what you were going to be getting? Because I imagine you probably forgot, or maybe you mildly remembered last week. All I said was it still ties into a supernatural element is here, and Robert Downey Jr. I think that's all I said.
Yeah, that's vaguely what I remembered. The thing that I was lingering on was the actual title, because the phrase like heart and soul's a normal thing, but I noticed that souls was plural and heart wasn't, so I was kind of wondering like, okay, there's a reason for that, and what's that going to be? And also, I did vaguely remember, yeah, it's going to tie into supernatural. Heart and soul kind of sounds like it has like a religious-y, afterlife-y thing to it. So when the premise began, it was like, okay, there it is. Okay, I understand where this is going. But immediately walking in, I didn't really know what it was going to be. The film opens with like that score over the credits that was like, I really enjoyed that score. It felt very, yeah, like from the 90s. It felt very kind of whimsical in a way, uplifting. Ethereal. Yeah, that's a good word, especially since we're going through like the sky.
Yeah.
Reminded me of some of the old Harry Potter openings.
Yeah.
So that kind of set me in the mood for what this film was going to be like. Okay, it's not going to be like connected because it's a horror film or anything like that. It's going to be some sort of
lighthearted affair.
Some sort of lighthearted spiritual affair, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that was kind of accurate, yeah.
And so as it unfolded, this movie has a very interesting structure. It's very interesting because the first half hour is set in like the 50s and 60s. And we don't meet Robert Downey Jr. for quite late in the game, like 30 minutes in. And you don't really know what the plot of the movie is because they don't know either. You don't get the bus driver scene until like 30, 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
It's almost half the movie's burned up by then. But like, it's interesting structure, but how did you feel about how the movie unfurled itself in terms of plot and tone? Because what did you think this movie was going to be when it started? Did you think it was going to be a comedy film? Did you think it was going to be a drama? How did you feel? Because it is one of those ones where it starts out a certain way, and then by the end, you're like, oh.
Yeah. I think until the second person got on the bus, I was still trying to really work out what this film was going to be, because we're meeting our four lead characters, other than Robert Downey Jr., who, as you said, doesn't appear for a while. And they've all got different things going on, different little stresses or goals that they have to achieve at the moment. And obviously it's all going to link together somehow. And I was wondering, like, okay, is it going to be like thematic? Are they actually going to meet, or is it going to be more direct? And once the second person got on the bus, it's like, okay, they're all gathering to a meeting point and something's going to happen on this meeting point. And obviously it was a bus crash and they die.
Yeah.
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 So up until that point, I was really just in like, where's this going mode, and then it got a bit clearer as the bus thing started happening.
And what about the tone? How did you feel about how the tone weaved itself in and out of being funny and dramatic? Because it's funny to see Robert Downey Jr. be possessed by Julia and he's kissing and being seductive, but then it'll be like, hug a bug. It's like really sad.
Yeah, a lot of, when they get up to the possession stuff, a lot of that kind of leans into the comedy a bit more. A bit more unnaturally, I would feel.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it was very funny stuff, but it's like, you know, you've been following this guy for 30 years. You know what his deal is here. You know how things will go if he behaves a different way, and you're you're flirting with a bunch of old men when you're this 30-year-old guy who's got a girlfriend.
But then they have an explanation of how they can get away with that.
Yeah, they do. And that links it back into, like, the believability of, like, hey, tell them this. And Robert Downey Jr. doesn't even question. He's like, that's good. I'm going to go do that.
And then Charles Grodin is like, I don't even know. like, is that a real medicine? It sounds real. I rewatching it for this. This isn't a movie I like to rewatch all that often nowadays because it makes me sad, like in a good way. I'm not afraid to admit that I cry or tear up in this movie at multiple points. So I don't like to rewatch it all that often. But when I do, I like it. I enjoy myself. I like all of the souls. I like Robert Downey Jr. as much as you can because he's a little turd at the beginning of this movie. The transition of him from kid to adult with the sunglasses tells you everything you need to know about what he's become.
It was a good transition too.
It was. Kurtwood Smith's in this movie.
He was, yeah. By the end,
returning from Oscar for this.
By the end, I forgot about that, but then when I saw him in the credits, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the tone in the movie, and another reason why this almost could have been an unappreciated masterpiece is we've talked about this a lot over the years. Don't you miss big Hollywood movies like this? Like the mid-tier, weird premise, but like it's sincere? There's not a cynical bone in this movie's body at all. This doesn't feel like somebody wanted to make a movie so that it can make money. It feels like someone out there or a series of people had a project they really wanted to bring to life and give to us. That's what I like about this movie, and I feel we've discussed this many times. Don't you miss these kind of studio comedy, mid-range movies? There's so few of them nowadays. It feels like you have to go for much lower budget ones or more independent ones. Yeah,
this film had a big lack of this kind of modern, not cynicism, but, kind of self-awareness, over pop culture-y, referencey things. Like, obviously it has songs in it, that's pop culture, but, like you said, like we opened this podcast on, there were diegetic reasons for those songs. It wasn't just, oh, here's a song for the background of this scene.
Because this film didn't do well when it came out financially, and it was critically reviled as well. It wasn't received as well. And it gained an audience like Austin Powers through video and then TV, with TV, right? And it's sad because, one, if this movie did come out today, there would be no difference. It would fail, right? If this movie came out today, the way it is, with the sincerity and the fun and the music and the dancing and like the blatant emotional beats that it has, I don't think it would succeed. And two, they won't make movies. They just wouldn't. Could you imagine Robert Downey Jr. doing this movie in the modern day? Never.
Yes.
Never. And this was him a year after doing Chaplin, an Oscar-nominated film of his. He was fresh off of an Oscar nom.
And a little over a dozen years away from The Shaggy Dog.
Yes, our favorite film of Robert Downey Jr.'s. But let's briefly talk about that. We geek out over this, but there's actors that we know, and there's actors that we've had on the podcast before. As I mentioned, the director and the writers did Tremors, and some of the writers, the original two writers aren't from that, but it's the whole thing. Because this was based on a short film that got expanded into something else, originally called Seven Souls or something like that, and then it got into this. And the guy who did Tremors was brought on to direct this, and he wanted to touch up the script, so he got his two guys that he uses all the time to lighten up the script and give it some extra stuff in there, like the walk like the man motif. And we got him, and he brings a few people, like the guy at the very end who they go to the farm.
The guy that owns the house.
He was in Tremors. He was, I'm forgetting a character's name, Miguel, or he was the guy who worked at the convenience store, and he had the little, he was one of your favorites. He had the little ride-on that they used to distract the graboid. He was in that, and he worked as that director a few times. We have Robert Downey Jr., of course, from The Shaggy Dog. We have who else do we have, Bartek? We have a few others. Kurtwood Smith.
Yeah, Kurtwood Smith. Milo was one of the ones that I noted. He was in Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yes, Tom Sizemore. It was great. Yeah, we have a couple others. I said Kurtwood Smith. We have, of course, the one that I kind of teased Bartek before we did this, because Bartek was like, yeah, one of the two main guys, and I know, and there's the main obvious one, and I kind of laughed in my head being like, yeah, the main obvious one, and then I went, oh wait, he's talking about Robert Downey Jr., not Charles Grodin. Yeah. Who you know from?
Big Fat Liar.
No.
Was he not the Big Fat Liar guy?
No. He was the X. He was the dad in the X. Your favorite character in that movie, in which he was the drunken, like he was mowing the yard.
Oh, that film, yeah.
With Zach Braff.
I had to refresh my memory. Which one was the X? That one.
And he had your favorite scene ever in a movie.
My favorite swear.
There's a scene in the X that's inexplicable. It comes out of fucking nowhere. And it's him. I can't even describe the scene. He touches a lamp that's really hot and just, it swears in the movie, in a movie that's restraining its swear words.
He was having I can't remember if it was
tech issue or something, right?
I can't remember if it was a tech issue or an emotional scene or something, but he's talking to the main character relatively in a gently voice, like normal conversational voice. And then at the very end of the scene, he touches a lamp.
And it's hot.
It's really hot. He just abruptly goes, fuck, and then hard cut, like, before he even finishes swearing.
Yeah, and you always bring it up. And then he also had your other favorite scene in that movie, in which Zach Braff runs to him for help, and he's mowing the lawn whilst drinking a scotch.
And this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is at a point where he doesn't like Zach Braff because he's... Like,
he ruined his life. He ruined his business.
Yeah. He got him fired and stuff. So
that's why he's day drinking.
So they're not getting along. And then Zach Braff reveals something that should make him hate him more.
But he likes him.
But then that honesty like made him like him.
And that's Charles Grodin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think. There must be one or two others in here, but the movie's filled to the brim with interesting character actors and people that we just like in general. And Charles Grodin is another reason I wanted to cover this podcast, because he unfortunately passed away a few months ago in real life.
Yeah,
and
mid-May, I think.
I wanted to cover the movie, but then I was like, I should later. I don't want to make it feel like we're doing it because he passed away. But
I've had films I literally had to scrap because, they just died. I don't want to.
And it's sad because... To talk about Charles Grodin for a second in this movie, I know we'll talk about it. He plays Harrison. I'm used to Charles Grodin being what we saw him in the X and the Beethoven movies, Midnight Run, Clifford, his talk shows in which he was always, I don't know how to describe, aggravated is his character. I would describe, like, he would often play aggravated characters, people who are frustrated, would get easily angry. But in my life, I've always known him for this, in which he's not that. And same with Robert Downey Jr. In my life, I always knew Robert Downey Jr. for this movie. And Robert Downey Jr. doesn't really play characters like this anymore. So it's weird how when you see a movie for that first time or when you're young and you see an actor and you're enraptured by them, you place them in that box. But then you find out that this box you place them in isn't actually the box that they're usually placed in. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, apparently Chester is Stifler to most people.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And here, this is probably, I'm biased, but this is my favorite Charles Grodin performance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he was in, So I Married an Axe Murderer. He was reprising a role from a previous movie in which he was in the car and Mike Myers was trying to escape from the axe murderer or something, and he knocks at this car window and he rolls down his window and it's just Charles Grodin and he's cynically and dryly saying, "I'm not going to help you."
There was something like that.
And he just drives away. It was one of the funniest moments in that movie, and he does it with absolute smugness. I love him in this movie. There's no sense of that. He's really genuine and the character is very quiet and reserved and nervous, but he's a little bit of a pompous prick at times in the movie. Like, he still has those little flares of what Charles Grodin would deliver as an actor. And I want to ask, did you have a favorite soul? Who was the one that you gravitated towards, whether they were funny or they drew you in because of their tragedy or their personality or the performance?
That's a tough one, because like you, I liked all of them. They were all really heartwarming in different ways. They all had their own thing going on. When I was looking up about this film, I found a thing online talking about how each of them sort of represents the 4 different types of love, which is like romantic, friendly, unconditional, and the other one. Platonic, yeah. And so they all brought something different to their relationship with the kid. I really liked how at the very beginning of the film, they're suddenly tethered to this baby and they don't know what's going on. And then it cuts to, a few years later and they're already like warm to the child.
Yeah.
And that was really nice to see because at this point, I just kind of learned each of their deals. Like Charles Grodin is this kind of stressed, anxiety-filled guy, and then
wants to sing.
And then you see him here a few years later, just a few seconds later for us, and like he's just warmly looking at the kid and like part of the group, really comfortable. And it's like, I'm already feeling things. Like, this is really nice.
Yeah, when he's a baby, right, and he's like in his little stroller thing, and the parents are like, "What's he doing? Laughing at the wall. I buy him all these toys and gifts, and he laughs at the walls." Now he's gonna go off and laugh at the kitchen.
Yeah, and because like singing is such a big part of it, you obviously get the sense from the what's the black lady's name?
Penny.
You get a sense from Penny with her like song that she sings to her child that she kind of brings the music to the group, but also kind of him because he's the singer of the group.
And Milo is the one who sings "Walk Like a Man." That's his song.
Yeah.
And Penny and Julia works at the club, so they all have a musicality to their characters, which is also what makes you buy the musical sequences in the movie. It makes you buy into the schmaltziness of seeing a little 7-year-old boy sing "Walk Like a Man" with these 4 wacky characters. One's in a hat and a vest, and the other one's like a greaser, and the one's a prim proper black lady, and the other one's like, Julia's like the typical 50s blonde haired with the pink thing in it. Like, it makes you buy into the absurdity of that because each one of them has subtly indicated that they have some musicality to them, which is neat. It's interesting, but yeah, you're saying like it's hard to pick.
It is hard to pick, yeah.
You get attached to them.
Yeah, in terms of what you said, like, did you have? Well, you didn't ask me, but the choking point or moment that gets you choked up.
Oh yeah.
I didn't have one exactly, but I had little bits of ones in certain points, and I remember when Milo was gonna go away, like the first one to pass on, like
he didn't want to go.
Yeah, he didn't want to go, and there was because we just came off of them singing "Walk Like a Man" on the street as bus suddenly comes. I did get a little bit choked up when he was going, and it was just this thing of like he's not going to be in the film anymore. It was really kind of a sincere thing, and
it in that moment, right, the success, it's like the celebration moment of them singing and dancing in the street, and you get that feeling like, Robert Downey Jr.'s character is finally in tune with them. Like, we're not going to get resistance now. And,
maybe they'll celebrate every time that
they're singing and dancing. And then the bus comes and you're like, oh no, the reality of the pitch of this movie is each one of them's going to go. And you don't want them to go because you like them. And like you said, he's no longer going to be in the movie now. He's gone. And you realize that's going to be every single one of them. They're going to leave, and you're going to miss them. And even though they're going to have a happy ending of a sort, you don't want Penny to go. You don't want...
Yeah, and even thinking ahead, there's this thing of like, okay, well, so what's the order going to be? Like, who are they going to justify as being the last one? What's the dynamic going to be there?
Did you pick it? What the last one would be?
Did I have a guess? The only thought I had in my mind was, okay, well, they're not just gonna, like, do the 2 men first, so I was immediately wrong on that.
The 2 best friends first, and then the other 2 best friends last.
I mean, having seen the full film, in retrospect, it makes complete sense why they picked who they picked, but no, I didn't guess it.
Because we start with her. She's the first soul we start with, right? Is she, Julia? Or she's the one we get the most stuff happening in the beginning where she's got her boyfriend issues at the club.
I can't remember who we start on.
But yeah, she's the last one. But I know it's hard, but do you have a favorite soul? Like one that you just think about or like, or just They emotionally got you because for me as a kid, it was Milo, obviously. He was the funny one. He was the gangster guy. He was the pervert. He was the one that Robert Downey Jr. really nailed when he was possessed by them. Like he did the full, hey. And, he was trying to break out. I liked him as a character. I liked that performance. I cried as a kid every time you had the finger guns out the window and he's like, I don't want to go, don't forget me, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they really connected, and he was his masculinity, and I love that. I love Milo as a kid. My sister, I think Milo's their favorite. But as an adult, I have to say it's Harrison. I love Harrison. When I think of this movie, the scene I think of when I think of this movie now is the national anthem scene, the Star Spangled Banner scene, and Harrison refusing to do it. And he's like, I'm gonna fail. And Robert Downey Jr. just delivering it so perfectly, without malice, but with the sternness of, no offense, but you died a failure because you never tried. And just Charles Grodin's reaction to that, like perfectly played. That is why he's my favorite. I love that performance. He's also very funny. One of my favorite gags from Charles Grodin in the movie is just his voice of when Robert Downey Jr. is just woken up from the car crash and he's like, oh my God, this can't be real. Oh, these people can't be real. And he like turns away to look at the wall, and from underneath the bed, Charles Grodin's head pops up and he's got this big grin and he's like, hello, hey. And Robert Downey Jr. is like, fuck, I can't deal with this. So he's my favorite. I love his look. I love the hat. I love his pitch as well of the sad, anxiety-filled man who felt like he was a failure, and he made himself a failure because of that, and he wanted to sing. I like him. I like Harrison a lot. And also Penny. I can't help but feel the most sorry for her out of all of them that died. She's like the one I was like, realistically, I wish you were the one that lived, because she was the mother. She had these beautiful relationship with her kids. She was working. She was a good person. And like, all of them, except for her, their thing that they had in life was like they didn't pursue this, or they didn't do the right thing. But for her, it's like, what else was she supposed to do?
Yeah, she was in the middle of something, and
she was going to work.
Yeah.
What else is she supposed to...
Well, I meant she was in the middle of being a mother.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you know what I mean? Like the others, Julia didn't go for the guy and was pushing him off, and Milo robbed from a kid, and Charles Grodin didn't want to sing. But her, it's like, well, she was just going to work. And then she died. It's like, that's the most tragic to me of the deaths. Oh, sad. Yeah. Obviously, hence the movie exists. But on that level, I feel like a strong attachment to Penny, and hence her ending is really probably my favorite ending of all of them. The whole car park sequence and the hug and all of that. But yeah, that's kind of where I land on the favorite soul type of deal. I still see the look on your face where you're like, please don't make me decide.
I mean, honestly, it is kind of a toss-up for me between maybe Milo and Penny for similar reasons you just said. They had a lot going on. I liked them all. I guess Julia had kind of the least going on for me in that sense, but, the way her story ended was more unique than the others, because it was like, I secretly wanted to do... She found a different way to make peace with herself.
Yeah, which I thought was really great, because it broke up the formula of the movie.
Yeah.
And they left it to the end, and that was really great. Yeah, Julia gets left on the back seat a lot, and that's kind of interesting about her character is you're presenting that Harrison's the one that's always pushing his aside for everyone else, but it's actually Julia that does that throughout the movie, and she does it far more subtly. And then at the end, you're left with, oh, that was your problem all along. You just kept pushing it to the side. And now here we are, and he's dead. And he died tragically. From all implications we can understand, he died alone and sad, which was really tragic to hear. Yeah, it's hard to choose. All the performances are great to me. We're fans of actors and acting. Did you have a favorite performance in particular, even though removed from what you think of the character? Did anyone stand out to you, new or old? Because like you said, a few of these people we know, a few you don't, I imagine.
Yeah, that's tough. I guess I'm coming back to Milo. Because like you said, he kind of is the fun one. He's kind of the joker there. And there are times where you question, like, okay, how seriously is he really taking all of this? Because in the montage, before the kid becomes Robert Downey Jr., he's still a kid. He's kind of like half on like, oh yes, sincerely raising the kid and, trying to get out. He's like, I'm still testing like, how far away we can get away from this tethered kid. I'm still thinking about, what I'm going to do after this is done.
Looking up skirts.
Yeah, the pervy one. But yeah, when things need to get serious, like he is completely sincere about, making peace with his regrets. He takes what he did to that one kid really seriously. His sincerity, pushes Robert Downey Jr. to letting him possess him.
Yeah.
And yeah, when he succeeds in doing what he did and everyone's really happy, like I really felt that.
I love Tom Sizemore in this movie. I'm not used to this from him either. I'm used to him playing soldiers a lot. I'm used to him playing cops a lot. I'm used to him playing pricks. Like outright bad people, like in Twin Peaks.
He wanted to poison Dougie
Jones. And and Tom Sizemore, from all accounts I understand, is a very difficult person to work with. Most movies I've ever seen, trivia with him in it says he was difficult to work with.
Okay.
Here, that doesn't seem to be the case. Him and Robert Downey Jr. got on really well, and they went on literally from this movie to Natural Born Killers. Both of them were in that together, so they just went from one project to the next together, which is cool. Another Tremors relation is the actress who plays Julia is the real life wife of Kevin Bacon, and she was pregnant with their kid during Tremors.
Mm-hmm.
So the director wanted to bring her in for this, and there's fun little connections and tissues there, which is neat. I think that's cool. Yeah, from an acting perspective, it has to be Penny. Alfre Woodard.
Yeah,
she's always been fantastic. She was in my childhood in the 90s because she was in 3 important movies for me. This, Scrooged with Bill Murray, in which she basically plays this exact same character, but she gets to live. She's basically, because Scrooge is obviously the Ebenezer Scrooge story. She's, what's his co-worker that he won't let have a break? Ebenezer Scrooge?
I can't remember the name.
But you know what I'm talking about. She's that character, basically. But she's, his secretary, and she has kids, and she's really good in that movie. And then First Contact, the Star Trek movie First Contact, in which she is amazing in that film. She acts against Patrick Stewart, and dare I say, outacts him. She outdoes Patrick Stewart, in my opinion. Alfre Woodard has also been in Desperate Housewives. I grew up with that. She's a fantastic actress. She's always been working. She blows me away in this movie because she makes me buy that she's a mother. She makes me buy that she's stern and serious out of the group, but also she's really fun and light, and it's like she would be a fun mum to have.
Yeah. When she's still alive and the kid asks her to sing, she's like, okay, yep, she's fully into it, like, even though she's got to go somewhere. And
to talk about the teary-eyed or the choking up moments, of course, she has most of them for me. Our good friend Sam Noonan and my sister and I all agree one of the saddest fucking scenes ever in a movie is when they decide to disappear when he's a little boy and she's like the last one. And by God, how do you not feel emotions when watching Alfre Woodard say goodbye to this little boy?
Yeah.
Because out of all the characters, she's the only one that actually had a kid as well. So it's like saying goodbye to a child yet again.
It was the scene from AI, but with appropriate music.
Yeah, and also I cared more.
Yeah.
Sam Noonan has said this, and I'm curious of what you think. That kid, the young Downey Jr., he's also the main kid in the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies. He's his son in those. Mm-hmm. One of the better child performances in a movie for what age he is. What do you think?
I think so, yeah. That kid can act worth a dick, to quote Sam Noonan's... Well, to opposite quote Sam Noonan.
He can act worth a dick. I can't help but get emotional when he's crying. My sister, when we talk about this movie, would just say... in an imitation of his voice, "Don't go, Milo." And I go like this.
The added thing.
I can't. It's just so sad.
The added like first name basis thing, really adds a kick to it.
What did you think of that? Like, did that get you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I know sometimes you're a little bit more strong to these obvious emotional and manipulative moments, which this of course is. I'm not saying that as a derogatory phrase, because evidently we enjoyed it, but a little boy crying is a key.
I'm a lot softer on kids crying than I am on dogs being unhappy.
There's no dog in this movie, huh?
There is a dog in this movie, but yeah.
Who? Which one? Oh, yes, that's right.
Milo's,
that's right.
Milo's
robbing. Yeah, and you didn't check for a dog. That scene, it's fantastic. When they all have to disappear, you understand why they're disappearing.
And they're trying to make it as soft as possible, but
it's going to be traumatic no matter what.
Yeah.
And it really fucks him up, and it gives him issues later in life. Like, they're responsible for issues in this guy's life. And just seeing also, like, the little kid just crying his eyes out, screaming for his friends that left him behind. Oh my God. It's just, I don't know if did you ever have any imaginary friends or figments or things like that in your childhood? Do you remember or do you know?
I think we've had this discussion in Drop Dead Fred.
Which this movie did remind me in parts of Drop Dead Fred.
I think my answer there was, I knew of the concept and I tried it out, but when you kind of force something, it's not really real, so not really.
Yeah, I didn't really either, but I do get that understanding of when I watched this as a kid and when I watched it as an adult, that saying goodbye to a thing that isn't real forever, like saying goodbye to my toys. There's that period in your life where you just know that these toys aren't going to be what they were to you once, Yeah. In that regard, or that area, that school, whatever it is. So, yeah, I love the balls on the movie too, to actually have it be like they're making him look like a crazy person as a kid, and the parents have to like analyze whether or not they need to take him to a counselor, like a school counselor, or like to a physician, or to a mental institute or something. Like,
yeah. But they don't take it like too much as a joke though. Like it's the cause of this kid's trauma, the fact that we have to stop doing what we're doing.
Yeah, we can't have the fun anymore. They have to be invisible. Isn't that a torment? Didn't you feel sorry for them when the bus driver turned up? He's like, "What have you been doing?" Didn't the angel come down and tell you? And they're like, No. We've just been in this limbo, not knowing what we're going to do for 30 years.
Yeah, that was one of the hanging threads that I was like, okay, so what was up with that angel? Why didn't they appear? But
they just didn't bother.
Yeah, the film never went there.
No, angels are just lazy. What did you think about the bus driver character? I thought he would be one of your favorites. We haven't talked about him, but I thought he would be one that you would get a kick out of because of one silly reason. He looks like a guy that you get a kick out of in movies. You like funny-looking people, and he's very funny-looking.
He does have the look, yeah.
He looks like a bug.
In this film, like, he was combating, very emotional characters, though. So there was this sense of, like, you're here. Like, I don't hate you, but, it's what you represent, kind of.
He did kill them because he was a perv.
He did that. Well, yeah, that's true. But he said sorry. He didn't say soz, but he said sorry.
He's gonna serve 500 years of sorries, so it'll be fine.
Yeah. I liked that even though he was just doing his job, he understood, like, the gravity of, what he's putting them through. Like, Jesus, 30 years and you guys didn't know what you were doing? I'll try to buy you some time, but yeah.
Yeah, I like him. I like that performance. I like how sorry yet not sorry he actually is. Like, hey, I'm serving my time. Like, he doesn't fully come to terms with how much of this is his fault. And I loved it when they all confront him about that and have a go at him and like really lay it on him. And he played it really well. Even in scenes where you're having a very dramatic moment and he's a comedic character, he as a performer and as the character written, they know how to pull it back enough in which it's not intruding upon the tone of the scene, but also not disregarding the existence of the character thus far. Like at the very end with Julia. And he's like fiddling around and Robert Downey Jr. screaming at him. Like, it didn't work. She can't go fix it. Fuck you, basically. That character is still played the way we know him, but he isn't making the scene funny. and thus throwing off the entirety of the tone of that scene, in which it is supposed to be the big gut moment scene, in which it's, wow, one of our souls can't actually do the thing that the other ones did. They can't actually fix themselves. How are we going to move forward? And the angel being like, well, here's the thing. Would you call him an angel? Rachel and I were talking about this. I'm like, well, he's a servant of God, and he works for heaven. I guess he's an angel of some sort. We know there's a hierarchy of angels thanks to the film Michael.
Yeah. Where we vastly overestimated how high they were.
Yeah. I don't know what he is, if he's not technically an angel.
No, I don't think we see any angel characters in this film.
No, but like what he represents. I think I'm fair enough to call him an angel of some sorts. Or a servant of God. I don't know what he... It's not like this is Beetlejuice, where Beetlejuice directly tells you, like, this is what people are in the afterlife for these reasons.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear these negatives that you have, because we're talking very highly. Obviously, I want to talk more about positives and the emotional moments, but I'm curious what you didn't like or didn't think worked.
When I talk about objective negatives, it's mostly in relation to the premise and how it plays out. So obviously, I really like the premise, the whole thing of, everyone confronting the things that they regret or they need to confront before they can move on.
Need to fix, yeah.
And the whole aspect of them leaving. It's a big emotional thing and it's really good. But once they have the first person leave and you get a sense of like, oh, that's what the rhythm's going to be. Every single scene after that is another person leaving.
Yeah.
And the film's pace really increases and it kind of hits familiar notes very often. Like when the twist thing happened with Julia at the end and, it's like, oh, what are we going to do now? The formula's been changed. It's okay. In 2 minutes, it's resolved still. And I felt like...
Too episodic.
Yeah, it's an unavoidable kind of thing. Maybe if you had more time, like this is only a 100-minute film, you're asking way too much for, what I'm saying here. But it's just like an unavoidable, pitfall that you're going to fall into if you don't have like a really out of the box way to deal with it. Again, I really like the film and the emotional points still worked for me. And I wouldn't, put this film down because of this problem.
Well, at least I think the thing is the second two, like the last two, Penny and Julia, they do try to throw off the formula by we have to find Penny's kids and there's an investigation.
Yeah.
And we have to go to the next door neighbor who's still alive, and the hope is like the trail's gone cold because we have a time pressure. We can't go all the way to meet the daughters, but we don't know where Billy is, and so on and so forth, like in the script.
Yeah.
And like that's how they keep that lively. While with Charles Grodin, it is as simple as his character flaw of just do the thing. That's all you need to do, is just literally do the thing. Nothing stopping you except for yourself.
Yeah.
Milo had to have an action sequence where he's versing an old man, which, fun fact I learned about that old man was they hired him in real life. He was balding at the time. So when he was younger, they just decided, oh, you know what? Just put a wig on him. And then when he's old, just take the wig off. So that's how that worked.
Yeah. I'll give the film this. I didn't consider this, but like, Penny's one kind of had two halves where the first half was before Harrison left and the second half was after. So
yeah.
That's something at least. Yeah, I'll give it that.
It's not as if the film didn't try to do like
for
liven
sure.
it up, but
I liked all of their scenes.
You do notice the structure of the movie, and like this is it's a gimmick movie.
Yeah, the structure and the quickened pace, basically.
Yeah, I didn't mind the pace too much. I think one of my main criticisms, if I can get into mine, is I do feel like there is a artifact of something that is removed from this movie with Kurtwood Smith's character. Again, this might be me projecting a version of like It's a Wonderful Life type of deal, in which, is it me or like they really put emphasis on like how harsh Robert Downey Jr. is being on Kurtwood Smith, and like this is a big thing for him to succeed at his job and to destroy Kurtwood Smith. And then at the end of the movie, I guess Kurtwood Smith still gets destroyed. Like, there's no indication, there's no payoff.
Yeah,
there's no
I completely forgot about him.
How he actually figured out a way to use the morals he's learned in the movie to do the right thing, kind of like It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, it felt like it was going in that direction to improve his life overall, but the film settled on his romantic life.
And there's another issue I have. I don't give a shit about his girlfriend in this movie. I don't give a shit about her parents. He doesn't even meet her parents in the end, does he?
No.
Still doesn't meet them. Like, I was waiting, like, that's an issue I have too. Like, those two aspects are the things that drag it down for me. They feel like one's just an introduction to what a prick he is nowadays, and there's no real payoff to that. And then the second being the drama in his life that these ghosts are interfering with, which, again, I don't feel was as whole as it thinks it is. I said it reminds me of Drop Dead Fred a lot. I don't know if you thought about that when watching this movie. There's sequences that remind me of Drop Dead Fred, like in the meeting room when he's possessed and things are going crazy, or like when Milo's blocking his view to write things and he's doing crazy. Really remind me of Drop Dead Fred when Fred interfered with Carrie Fisher in that scene, and Carrie Fisher's like, "Excuse me," and she goes outside like she's pretending, like she thinks that she's dragging Fred out on the chair, and then she just starts beating him with her shoe, and everyone's like looking at her like crazy. Similar to me. But another thing that's similar to me in that movie is our main character's having relationship issues, and this imaginary thing is interfering with that and making it heightened.
Mm-hmm.
She had relationship issues with her mother and with her husband and this new guy, and it felt whole to that movie. Well, here it does feel like a Hollywood script thing, like we gotta chuck in a girl in there. We can't just let it be his job. We have to have love. And yet I feel like, you know, with Julia's payoff there, it's nice on paper, but I didn't really feel as much about him reconnecting with his girlfriend, because I never really got to know his girlfriend.
Yeah, a lot of the scenes with the girlfriend kind of hit those familiar notes of like, well, what's wrong with our relationship kind of thing, and the character like has reasons for not giving the answer because they're, you know, far out, and it will sound like an excuse given his reputation.
I was mad.
And
That was good. That was a good scene.
Yeah, and a lot of her reactions, you know, kind of hit those familiar ones too. Like when he's like, "Do you want me to explain?" And she's like, "Yes," and then he like hesitates for a second, and she has this really big reaction of like, "See, it's happening again." It's like, well, that felt a bit unnatural. Give him a bit more time.
They set that up earlier, in all fairness, that he does that, and he's like, "Oh, you got bullshit."
That is true, yeah.
So it's like, but I agree, it feels unnatural because it is a mechanic of the movie rather than a theme of the movie that feels as whole as the other ones do.
Yeah, it was. I guess to an extent, it felt scripted.
Exactly, that's it.
Yeah.
So it was written by writers.
Yep.
Any other things that didn't work for you? You said you had a couple.
Honestly, it was mostly just the structural and pacing things.
Too fast pace?
Just at the end, I felt it was.
Well, the bus was chasing them.
It was, yeah, and I guess that's another thing. Like when the bus turns up at the beginning of all those scenes, it's not that long ago that the bus turned up in a scene first time.
But
again.
that's the point, right?
It is the point, yeah. But it's like, oh, you like 30 seconds ago you turned up and took someone away, and now we've got another like. Not horror sting, but like, you know, dramatic sting of like, oh, the bus is here, we have to hurry.
The most effective one was when it was Harrison, when it just went on the stage, and there wasn't a horror sting or like a time pressure thing. It's just like, and it matches the music, like, and now it's ending.
Yep.
You know, it was good. BB King showing up and like playing the guitar and all of that. That was really great. I love that. I love Billy grown up. I like the cop Billy grown up. I loved. I have to ask, did you pick that was going to be Billy?
Somehow I didn't, but then when it happened, I'm like, how did I not pick that? I guess I was
the only other black adult in the movie.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I guess I was so stuck on
male black adult because we do have a neighbor.
Yep, it's like, oh yeah, this is the snarky deadpan cop that's gonna keep showing up in Robert Downey Jr.'s scenes, and it's gonna be an increased conflict. And then, oh, he had a really nice scene.
I love that scene.
It was a really good scene.
It's really well done. It's got a lot of movement to it, like lots of things, the car park environment, and like we already have this tension between these two because Robert Downey Jr. is like full crazy at this point.
But he's saying all of the right things.
Yeah, and he's saying them in the right way, but it's
Yeah.
like, also look at him. He's like twitchy. I don't know, man. That scene is just beautiful. Hug a bug. It just wrecks me because, yeah, you feel the most sorry. I feel the most sorry for Penny. And the life the kids had seemed, he got moved around and he's a cop now and he can't find his sisters. It's sad. And then, he gets to fix it for them. And, you don't get that scene, right, where at the end of the movie, Robert Downey Jr. is kissing his girlfriend and then it does like the montage of all the people that they've affected and being happy. It doesn't have that. You just assume it. Like the kid gets his stamps back. Yay! And then move on.
Yeah.
Don't see the kid again. And same with Billy. Billy, he's going to find his sisters. Cool.
Yeah, all of the trails that Rob Downey Jr. gave him are still there.
Yeah, and
unless they decide to kill the old lady off, but that's too mean-spirited for the film.
No.
No, it wouldn't fit.
We're talking about the sadness, but did you find it funny? Did you have any moments that made you laugh or smile or crack a chuckle?
I mean, Milo exists for that in a large part. Yeah, he's just this really fun, uplifting guy. Also naughty. He's very naughty.
He reminded me of Drop Dead Fred too, where Fred was looking up women's skirts because he's imaginary. They could just step on him.
He had a scene where he was getting the kid to look through a magazine for him.
Him and Charles Grodin. Harrison was also a naughty boy in that scene. I love that. I love that he was also a naughty boy.
He had his back turned for most of it.
But then he was like, whoa, hold on that page for a second.
Yes, but he still had his moment.
He's still horny.
And the women kind of dismissed like, oh, you boys.
Yeah, you boys.
It's like, oh, you should probably have a bigger reaction to
so
that.
all your
That's
laughs
fine.
came from Milo?
I mean, those are the obvious ones, but there were other ones. Like when they did the walk like a man theme scene right after resolving the stamp thing, and Robert Downey Jr. only seemed like half into it.
Yeah.
That was funny. It's like he's warming up to it, but he's still kind of being pushed into it.
What do you think about Robert Downey Jr.? Because we haven't seen him in a while in the pod. What's your relationship and viewpoint on him as an actor, a person, and how did you feel about all of that and just him in this movie?
Yeah, that one is really interesting because I haven't seen too much with him in it, but obviously in our modern day last 13 years, he's been a very big figure in pop culture.
Tropic Thunder,
Iron Man,
Dr. Dolittle,
the MCU overall being the major one.
Sherlock Holmes.
Oh yes, he was in that too. Yeah,
He's a working actor.
I've seen those two films too. I missed that. So I more so than having a history and seeing him in a bunch of things, he's got this reputation. I think hasn't he been like one of the highest paid Hollywood actors recently?
Yeah. And he also is one of those actors where, they were a big success one point, had a terrible fall, and somehow rose again.
Yeah, with the Shaggy Dog. Yeah, so when the Shaggy Dog revived him and then he got Iron Man from that, that was a role that he...
It's funny. When he did Iron Man, right? That was before MCU was owned by Disney, pretty sure. Or was it around the same? I thought they acquired... I can't remember. But either way, Shaggy Dog was Disney, so that was his entry into Disney cinematic universe, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so I wasn't joking.
You weren't joking.
No, I wasn't. But yeah, for the past dozen years, like, he's been known to play that character, Iron Man, Tony Stark.
The Snark.
Yep. Tony Snark. And I haven't seen too many of those films because I'm not into MCU, but I have seen Iron Man 3. I've forgotten Iron Man 2. I saw Avengers. I think there was one other one.
Captain America, any of them?
Was he in the second one, Winter Soldier?
I don't think so.
I've seen that one, but I haven't seen him too much, but you get a sense of what that character is pretty clearly just from a few times. And so in my head, I just thought of him as like, oh yeah, he's one of those like, witty, fast talking kind of guys, which, you love or you hate, but that's kind of what he was just in my head. And even when I thought back on the Shaggy Dog, where he was the villain of that film, there was a sort of, similar energy there too. So when I heard that we were doing a film of his from the 90s, I was just thinking like, oh, okay, he's gonna look younger, but what's that gonna feel like? And it did kind of throw me off because I'm not too used to seeing him in this kind of role.
Didn't see him in Weird Science?
I have seen Weird Science, but it was so long ago that I couldn't even tell you who was in that film.
He's in that. So you were thrown off by, seeing him young and slightly doing something different than the standard that you've seen him in.
Than what I've been used to knowing him for.
Oh, it's so funny, because when I was watching this, I know we make jokes. Robert Downey Jr. was in Shaggy Dog and he embarrassed himself. Like that's the best way to describe it. Because his physical comedy made no sense in that movie. Like, oh, he got bitten by a dog, but he's crazy. But he was already weird before then. Here, the physical comedy he does makes sense. And I was going to say, it's funny because what he's doing in this movie, like the physicality, the throwing himself, the screaming, the yelling, he did in the Shaggy Dog. This isn't unusual, really, what he's doing in this, but we care because it makes sense. More so than what he was doing, that aspect of the great Shaggy Dog. That aspect of him in that movie, which we agreed, weird in that movie. His character was very out of place in that otherwise great film.
Yeah, he was so weird that the audio in our episode was weird.
Yeah, exactly. We never got over it. We just couldn't handle him. But, I agree. I'm used to... Look, I've seen young Robert Downey Jr. I saw Back to School. I've seen Chaplin. I've seen Weird Science. I've seen a few others. This, obviously. And I don't know. It's kind of hard not to think about him in the modern context, where he is the snarky guy and the Mr. What's the Tony Stark quote, where he's like a playboy genius millionaire? That's his line, right?
Yeah.
It's hard not to think of him in that context. Well, here it's like, can you buy Robert Downey Jr. as a guy? Like a normal guy, as a guy?
Yeah, with a lot of relatable stresses.
Yeah, even though he's like a rich guy who drives a car that's fancy with the glasses. And I did buy him. I thought he was very sweet in the movie. I thought he was cute in the movie. That's how I would describe him. And I thought he was very funny. I thought he nailed impersonating all of them. We haven't talked about it, but how did you feel about when he was embodied by Penny? And he was breaking into the backstage by pretending to be the doctor. I thought that would be a scene that you would enjoy, because Robert Downey Jr. really nails that. He really captures her energy.
We know from Tropic Thunder that he can do black people.
He can. In this, he didn't need the makeup, though, did he? Oscar-nominated performance, Tropic Thunder. Never forget.
I almost forgot.
Never forget Oscar-nominated blackface in 2007?
I think it was 2009
No,
or
it was
2008.
after Iron Man.
Yeah.
Iron Man was 2008, I want to say.
Yeah, I think it was after.
But yeah, did you enjoyed him in this? Did you find him funny?
Yes. I found him very sincere. I understood why he was the way he was. When he first saw, his friends again and he was, freaking out about it, I understood. There was the possibility that he'd be happy to see them again, but he'd come to terms with, what was that memory from childhood? It must have been hallucinations. It was, giving me stressful time of my life. They were thinking of taking me to an institute. So, of course, he would run straight to the psychiatric ward.
And did you like how they quickly resolved that idea being the whole... in another movie, that could have been the conflict the whole movie of, I don't believe it. Believe it. I don't believe it. He does that for one scene, and then the way they resolve it is another crazy person actually sees them.
Yeah.
It's the quantum leap rule of, in Quantum Leap, Sam has a hologram that only he can see, except for small children, animals, and crazy people can see Al.
Right.
This has a lot of quantum leap energy, this movie, in which we must fix what once went wrong, and also people can see my imaginary friends as well, and it's just wholesome and sweet and all of that. Yeah, I like him. I wish Robert Downey Jr. would take more chances in these type of roles in which he plays more openly sweet and sincere characters rather than snarky Tony Stark, Sherlock Holmesy, weird characters. I think he's doing okay. He's still finding now that he's done with the MCU, now we have to see where his career goes, because he did Doolittle, and that's not a good sign. But I hope that he doesn't fall down the Johnny Depp rabbit hole of playing weird characters, because that seems like what he's doing, where he's playing, I'm a Welsh version of Dr. Doolittle, I do a funny accent, or I'm Sherlock Holmes, or I'm Tony Stark. Like, although this is a kooky, funny character, there was a naturalism to it at the same time that I feel is very different to his other roles that we've seen in more recent years.
I liked reading the trivia point that this is one of his favourite roles that he's done.
Yeah, how did you feel about that?
It was really nice that, like, such a film that we were considering for unappreciated masterpieces because it was kind of, forgotten or not talked about, is something that he holds close to him.
I think we've learned over the years that there are some actors, even if they're serious actors, some of their favorite projects are the ones that you can see in the film were fun to do.
3 of the Paul Giamatti films we've done, he's had a quote saying that those were really good roles for him.
And most people would scoff at those Paul Giamatti movies, being the idea that most people think Paul Giamatti, as we did before we did our own podcast, as prestigious actor Paul Giamatti. But, doing our podcast, we've tainted ourselves as, silly actor Paul Giamatti. But that's, it's okay that these actors, some of their favorite roles are these more lighthearted things. Because, he did Natural Born Killers after this, Robert Downey Jr. And apparently he said, it was day and night. This movie was day, Natural Born Killers was night. In terms of mood and tone. And it's very true. And I'm happy that he considers this one of his favorites, because one of the things that bums me out about the movie is that sense of it's forgotten. And I know it isn't. People have seen it. I've seen it. People do know this movie, but it is that sense of this does feel like it's not appreciated as much. And it is good to know that even after earning billions and billions and trillions of dollars doing these very well beloved movies, Robert Downey Jr., and even after having, his crash with his drug problem rising up again, he's had a very extraordinary life, an extraordinary film career since this movie. He still somehow somehow has a sweet attachment to this, which
I don't know when
is now 28 years old.
Yeah, I don't know when he said or wrote those words, but I'm hoping it was more recent.
He's said it throughout his career.
Oh, okay.
I've seen him in interviews bring it up every now and then. He just likes this movie.
Okay, that's good.
And I like it too. Yes, it has flaws, but to me it's a flawless movie regardless of that, because it does something that very few movies actually do for me, which is it genuinely moves me. That's its goal. Its goal is to move you emotionally. Did it succeed at that? Yes, it did.
Yeah.
You know me, we've done movies that are emotional and I've had far less of a reaction to them than I have in this discussion, say. I miss this. I want more movies like this that are just unapologetically nice. That's their thing. They're just nice. That's why we loved talking about Tom Sizemore. Twin Peaks: The Return, nightmare world of a project, but there was that underlying thing of one of the things that people like about The Return is Dougie Jones's storyline is everyone just becoming really nice, and it feels so unsettling.
And Tom Sizemore's part of that.
And in a series that's often pretty brutal and pretty tragic and pretty fucked up.
Especially The Return, yeah.
That's one of the standout things in that, because you want some light in the world. We both like our fucked up movies and games and stuff. We like our brooding and miserable and ooh, but also,
I think you literally said last week that I've been picking a lot of suffering films.
And I picked this film, which in a way is a suffering movie because it makes me sad, but also it makes me sad in a good way. It makes me happy. Is there a film like this for you? In any way, whether it's one you grew up with or one you've seen once or whatever, in which it brings these type of feelings out in you?
I'm not sure about films, but there's definitely been moments in things that has choked me up. In fact, just recently, right now, I'm playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, And that's from a franchise that's very well known for its side stories. It's like the side quests, which are all like uniquely written and have their own tone.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are very goofy. And there was one in this game that I'm playing right now that really made me choke up. It was like, oh wow, that was such a kind of simple thing, but you know,
Yeah.
I'm just lingering on like some of the shots from that story, and it's just, yeah, it got me emotional.
Yeah, in an otherwise very tonally...
Yeah, totally
Other thing.
wacky thing. Yeah, I play a lot more games than I do watch movies. So
Yeah.
I have, and obviously I play a lot of Japanese ones that are very story based. So there are little moments in a lot of them that, you know, I kind of linger on.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a movie out there that I could point to, but it's escaping me. I mean, I still have sentimental attachment to like my memories of the first time I watched Castaway.
Yeah.
That's a big one, but
That's a big one.
I don't get choked up anymore, but I still remember the first time I watched it.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned games, just a detour on that. Like, I really didn't expect myself to get as emotionally invested as I did in Red Dead Redemption 2. I just kind of looked at it like, okay, but I got emotionally involved with our main character in that game, which was a big surprise for myself. And I found myself a little bit like, oh no, Arthur, please. I know it's silly, but
No, it's fine. I mean,
it's one of those things I didn't expect it, because I've played other Rockstar games that have tried.
they have
They
a
rarely succeed.
They have a lot of cynicism to them, which is part of like the comedy. But
a lot of the now this is the Rockstar podcast. A lot of them do try to have an emotional, or at least this later part, like Red Dead 1 and GTA 5 and Red Dead 2. I can speak to those. Are trying to, even with all the cynicism and grossness, trying to get those heartstrings at you and actually have like sweetness in there in some way, shape, or form. It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if the other GTA games do that necessarily, but you know, I think it's something that I've noticed. I don't know if GTA 2 does that.
it doesn't. No.
With the what was the gang that has the smiley faces on their cars?
The Loonies, run by a guy named Elmo.
So, anything else you want to say about Heart and Souls? It's one of those movies I feel like I could talk about forever, but also like I don't know if there's actually much else to say. I just like this.
Is there
movie.
is there any more than just gushing about things we've kind of talked about?
Yeah, I just like all of these people.
We'll bring it up a lot in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you think you'll watch it again?
Oh, for sure.
Do you think it's a movie your mum would like?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think it's a movie your mum's seen?
I'm not sure. I'm leaning no, but who knows? I mean, she was 25 when it came out. She could have.
Is she a fan of Downey Jr.? Because I know your mum's a little bit like, I don't like this actor. I really like this actor, and I'll see it.
I don't know if she's ever mentioned him. I mean, she grew up in the 80s. Maybe she's seen
He was a big
Weird
thing.
Science.
He's been a big thing throughout her life, I would imagine.
Possibly.
He's been there. He's a guy. So I think that's all I got to say about Heart and Souls. I thoroughly recommend the movie, and I think you recommend it as well for a first-time viewer. You say, yes, check it out. I'm curious, to cap this off, I know this is a kind of self-indulgent way of doing this, but why do you think this isn't talked about more in media discussion and reviews? Because that was often what we would dissect when we did Unappreciated Masterpieces. Recently, we had an episode in which we guested for the Contrarians, in which they asked us why Oscar, the Sylvester Stallone movie, and it was like, well, it sits in this weird place, and one of the weird places is it's often lumped into a category, but this...
Yeah, that film, Oscar, is one that a lot of people have at least heard the title of, and like you say, lump in with a group of other films, so they haven't seen it, but they're aware of it. This one, maybe I'll have to pay attention again, but I don't know if as many people talk about it or know the title. Like, yeah. I'm sure there's a group of people that have talked about it in larger discussions, but yeah, I don't know.
It's weird. I just can't figure it out, because it's got a well-known cast, well-known director, and it isn't one that isn't, it's not like it doesn't exist. It's just, I find it peculiar, and I'm glad that we at least discuss it, and there are others, but I just, it's one of those ones where
I guess
somehow it slipped through the cracks in some ways, shape, or form, more than I think the film deserves to.
I think considering, how big Robert Downey Jr. is now, one of the big high-paid actors, and people, like him, like his roles, maybe they'll start hearing him talk about the film and check it out for themselves. Like, maybe that's an opening.
It's also one of those films that's just hard to find.
Yeah?
It's really hard to find on streaming. I don't know if you found it on streaming.
I couldn't find it anywhere.
I had to purchase it on DVD, and I couldn't purchase it locally. I have to hunt for it. There was a director's commentary track that was done on a podcast called the Rogue Commentary Podcast, and they had the director on, and one of the first things said was, if you're wanting to watch this movie, you'll have to buy it digitally because it's actually quite hard to find on DVD anymore, which I find cuckoo bananas crazy, considering the talent behind it and its existence. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's also just, it's getting harder to find. And I tried to look up Ebert's review of this. Couldn't find one.
Do you know if he did one?
I couldn't find one.
Okay.
You assume so, right? But
I mean, back at that period, I'm sure Gene Siskel was still alive.
Yeah,
so.
and, we don't talk about it much, but I looked at Rotten Tomatoes. 55 critic.
Okay.
Right in the middle. It's fresh. And then 76 something, I want to say, for audience.
Yeah.
Which seems to be the consensus all around of audiences land on a 7.
Yeah, like I said, IMDb was 7.
And critics split. So. That's Heart and Souls. So the next recommendation for a feature film for this podcast to cover is from our listening people, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. Walk like Orion.
So did your mum recommend a movie yet?
Well, she did put one on the list that we've been waiting for a guest for.
So we're not doing that.
Yeah.
I keep being like, because the suggestion's from my parents. I'm putting it out. And I was on the phone to them and they're like, could you please? And there's only so many times you can resist saying no to your parents being like, please do a movie. I want you to do a movie, Ryan. We're doing a Humphrey Bogart movie called The Caine Mutiny.
Is it from last year?
No, but it's where Michael Caine got his name from.
Oh, yes, that's right. I've heard that story.
Because his real name's like a weirdo name. Like Postlethwaite or something weird. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, we'll have to look it up for next time.
Yes, you'll bring all the trivia in, and then I'll say, hey, Bartek, did you bring the trivia in? You're like, I don't remember you telling me that. Because I forget all the time. So, 1950s movie, The Caine Mutiny. It's in color. It's talking about Twin Peaks connection. Miguel Ferrera's father is in that movie. Miguel Ferrera, who played Albert. Mm-hmm. His father is in that movie. He's near the end of that movie. So I reckon you're recognizing, because he looks like his son. Okay. Obviously, but with like hair. Mm-hmm. But Albert had hair in the original Twin Peaks, and then it was balding in the return, and obviously he was in RoboCop. Again, to give the Kurtwood Smith connection. He was in... Do you remember him in RoboCop? He was the guy who made RoboCop.
Yeah, that's right.
Miguel Ferrer. He was the guy who pissed his pants when Dick, the second in charge of OCP, grabbed him by his hair in the toilets. My favorite thing... Should we do RoboCop? No. One of my favorite things about that is Dick in that movie's taking a shit, and he comes out and immediately does that. He hasn't washed his hands. It's just gross.
And Miguel Ferrer's Dick did a piss.
Yes, it pee-peed. PP, Pictures Powwow, our show that you just listened to.
Dick made your dick cry.
So, yeah, that's it. You can find us on those social medias of Facebook and Twitter. You can email us at spitandpolished@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts, questions, queries, and concerns. And
do you say careers?
Thoughts, questions, queries, and concerns.
Not your careers.
Let us know your career and recommendations for movies you want us to cover. We'll add it to the list. That is it from us, Bartek. It was a pleasure to have you here again in the room with me. I wanted to comment on that. You weren't a soul. You weren't like this ethereal object that I was imagining that's tethered to me, but actually you're just a corpse on the ground.
Well, we are recording this on Halloween, October 31st, so, you know. But the episode's being released on Melbourne Cup, that international holiday.
Everyone's favourite international holiday.
It's where the horses run.
And die.
I looked up the names of all the horses that are racing on Melbourne Cup. They have weird names.
Harrison, Penny, Milo, Julia.
I think there was like one called like Johnny B. Angry or something like that. Like, there was one that was like...
Because that's like Johnny B. Good.
It's like very exciting, but both words were spelt wrong.
Good.
I don't know. Horse names are weird. Have they always been weird? I don't know.
Nay.
Nay. Yeah, instead of woo, it's nay. That's this episode.